Chantel. I'm a registered nurse, end-of-life doula, certified grief counselor, and certified thanatologist. I am a mother, a bereaved mother, a grandmother. I am a fur mother. I'm a feather mother because I have chickens, and a shell mother because I have a turtle. And I am a human being. So I wanted to be able to kind of do this video, which is actually longer, but it is one of those videos where to kind of get a better understanding as to how moments in mortality, Monday mortality minute, and just the journey of just doing end of life and how that became a thing for me. So I've had experiences with death, and I would honestly say that I had a mother and a grandmother who didn't hesitate to talk about death and what end of life was and what that looked like for them. And it was not something that they actually shied away from. They were very realistic. My grandmother would say, you know, that's a debt we all have to pay, which I think is true. And it was just, you know, what she wanted, where she had information and documentation put into place. And then there was my mother. My mother was a heart transplant recipient, and just going through the journey before getting her heart transplant of like the frequent hospitalizations and her experience, one of the things that she would say is that like if she would go into the hospital and something would happen and she would have not come back the way that she actually went in before, that she didn't want all those extra things done for her. And so I totally kind of understood it, but it became like more clear on my journey when I became a nurse. And those were things like life-sustaining measures, and like that incident where my mother actually had a stroke in 2009, and it went from what was considered to be where oxygen wasn't getting to parts of the brain to where it started to bleed into the brain. So it was like an experience of less than 24 hours. We were trying to determine what we were going to do, but it was a little clear because of the fact that she was clear about what she wanted. So it wasn't a difficult decision because we were more honoring what she actually wanted. Then that was, like I said, in 2009. So fast forward to 2016, where this was an experience for me that my oldest son, Javante Sr., he was actually murdered here in Milwaukee. And that was, I mentioned in one of my videos about how we have beautiful deaths and traumatic deaths. Definitely, those two that preceded are definitely traumatic death experiences. And I will never ever forget either one of them, but that one was a very different one because I remember when we buried my mother, my grandmother, who was alive, and said that a mother should never have to bury her child. And I kind of didn't understand it until I was the mother that was burying her child. And that was one of the experiences that I tell people, it kind of takes you down to the core where you think you know who you are, and then you find out you actually really don't. And there were a lot of things that I learned about myself from that experience too. And I'll talk about those as we kind of go through this journey of moments in mortality. And so fast forward after that, it was 2017. So a year after my son died, my grandmother, who had dementia, and so it was some decline mentally more than physically, but was a quick decline that happened after a period of time, and how it went to her going into the hospital to us having to yet again make the decision of what we wanted to do for her. And we actually had the beautiful experience between the support of our family to be able to bring her home on hospice. And I say I am pro-hospice, and I'm pro-hospice from not just the experience with my grandmother, but previous like work experience as well, that we were able to bring her home and allow her the privilege to be able to die at home, which is a very beautiful experience. So it's one of those very beautiful death experiences. And through the experiences that I had, one of the things that I learned from our experience about life insurance, and it was a conversation I had with my son probably about a week or two prior to him being killed, that we wanted to get life insurance for him for his son. And so he was in agreement, but the time had passed. It actually, him dying happened sooner than us being able to get that in place for him. So like the financial responsibilities of being able to bury people, and financial responsibilities when you don't have the finances to actually bury someone. And so it kind of like, it bloomed into this wanting to do something in the community as far as like, let's talk about the value of life insurance, and let's talk about advance directives, so those power of attorney for healthcare. Because even though like in our community we experience death a lot, unfortunately, but a lot of those conversations are not really had within our community. So started a nonprofit, which was Redefining Life Services, and wanted to do something like a community conversation event, like, let's talk about it. Let's talk about life insurance. Let's talk about advanced directives. And so I enlisted someone to be able to support the life insurance aspect, because I didn't know anything about that. So I choose not to speak on things that I really don't, it's not my wheelhouse. And so that wasn't. So to bring someone in who was knowledgeable to be able to talk and also look like us, to be able to share that information was super important. And then just to be able to continue to do that work, and just having more conversations and dialogue in our community, and supporting people getting advanced directives completed. And then it was, as I was sharing that, it was people sharing with me, like, I'm gonna send you this video, you need to watch this video. And I would share what I was doing in this vision, and it was like, I'm gonna share this video, and I want you to watch the video, because it's kind of like sounded like what you want to do. And it was by like the third time, I think it was, that someone said, okay, I'm going to send you this video. Like, this kind of sounds like what you're doing. And I'm like, well, finally, I think I'm going to watch this video. And I finally decided to watch the video, and I will never forget it. It was a video with, I believe a lot of you know who she is. Her name is Alua Arthur. And I remember her sitting at a table, and it was a woman who, I believe her diagnosis was cancer. There were 2 adult children, and then it must have been a grandchild that was like in the background. Just kind of like, living life, not being burdened by any of these things that are happening. And the beautiful thing I saw about it was her having this conversation herself, and not being the responsibility of the 2 other people that were sitting in the space trying to have this thought process and conversation for her. So I remember Alua Arthur was saying, my name is Alua Arthur, and I'm a death doula. And I was like, is that really a real thing? Because I'm just like, seriously? I'm a registered nurse. So being in the space of being a registered nurse, we know there's years of education, there's examinations that you have to do in order for you to get that license to say that you're a registered nurse. So I was kind of like hesitant at first. And I'm like, I got to do my research to see if this is a real thing. Did my research, found out it's actually a real thing. So I'm like, oh my God, I would really, 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 really love to do that. So I'm like, how can I become this death doula? And I kind of like created a little bit of criteria. 1, financially, was it reasonable for me? 2, how do people actually create their programs? Was it more like patient or people centered, or was it like diagnosis and like event centered? And so I ended up finding a program through, at the time it was called Lifespan Doula Association, and it was in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I remember I gravitated a lot towards it because it was like, it was person centered, and then it also gravitated towards the people that were centered around that person. And then I saw like the teaching space, which looked like a living room, and I'm like, what a better space to be able to have like a conversation about something so uncomfortable in a nice, comfortable living room setting. So I decided to jump in a car with my youngest son and my grandson, and we rolled over to Ann Arbor, Michigan for this beautiful 3-day like intensive experience of learning how to become a death doula. And during that period of time, I was like, I'm going to use the term end of life because, 1, it's a little more gentler than death, because death is something people seem is like harsh, but I'm like, death is actually what's happening. Death is what happened. So it's one of those things where you kind of like tweak something to get the attention of people. So end of life is a term that I use. But ultimately, yes, I am a death doula. And I love that term as well, because to me, it's empowering. to be able to use that term that way instead of hiding from it, to be able to say that in the spaces where we don't really want to talk about it a lot. So in that process, though, as I was searching, trying to find out the reality of a death doula, I came across something else, and it was called Death Cafe. And I'm like, I'm not going and I'm not looking into this stuff because I cannot put another thing on my plate. I just want to figure out this death doula thing, and then maybe I'll come back around. But I tried to ignore it and ignore it and ignore it until I couldn't ignore it anymore. So I ended up pushing that button. And I love the concept of Death Cafe because it was like, it's not just really talking about death, but it's the awareness and acknowledgement that at some point in time we're all going to die. And what do we do with our lives that we have here while we're here? So it was more of the death awareness, but also the awareness that we do have life and life to actually live. So I went and decided I wanted to become a Death Cafe facilitator, and I hosted my Death Cafe, I think we're going on 6 years ago now, and I think it was July. So right before I took my journey to become a death doula, I decided to host and facilitate Death Cafe MKE, which is here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And so we're actually going to be having a Death Cafe this coming Sunday. So super excited about that, and just going back into that space, to giving people a space to talk about all things death related, including living. So I'm looking forward to just coming back in that space and being able to talk about that as well, or more or less I facilitate that, because the people who attend are the people who get to talk, and the people are the people who decide like what we're going to talk about. So I also like that as well. So I have been going on this journey of being a death doula for 6 years, and I love talking about death. I love sharing death awareness with other people in the community, especially community of color, because we don't talk about it, but yet we're highly impacted by it. And so all these thoughts came about like, okay, we're going to talk about advanced directives. We wanted to put an initiative to be able to support at least 100 people getting their POAs done in our community. So it's still an initiative that's out there. I think I've gotten maybe 7 or 8. So I still roughly have about 93 to 92 to get done. And just being able to have more dialogue and conversations in our community, to be able to talk about death and how it impacts us and what we have the power to do about it. And from there, this past October, one of the programs for Redefining Life Services is the Redefining Life Center for Grief and Healing. So realize that it's beautiful to be able to have a space where people can come to when something happens versus looking for spaces to go to when something happens. So created this vision of having a space. It's more like a hub that people can come for grief support. And we were looking at more stigmatized griefs within our community. So that was overdoses, suicide, pregnancy and infant loss, violence, be it if it's intimate partner violence, if it's homicide, whatever that form that a person may actually have received harm through, and men's grief. And so decided like, let's, instead of creating a wheel, it's more of our value, our core values when it comes down to Redefining Life and Redefining Life Center for Grief and Healing, is that partnership and collaborations are essential in order for us to be able to do the work in the community. So decided to partner with some organizations. One is Victims of Milwaukee Violence, which actually is a support group that I attend because I did lose a child through violence here. And also Fearless Fathers, which is a male-centered grief support group. So decided, you know what, instead of creating the programs, why not connect with the programs that are already established and finding a central location and space that we can be able to offer those services through. So currently right now, our focus is violence in Milwaukee, grief support, and men's grief. And we currently, our person who does the overdose grief groups is currently on hiatus because she is working through her own journey of living here. So just much love and support to them for that. And so we'll be looking to bringing that programming back, and also looking into finding a facilitator that is in alignment for our suicide loss grief support group. I currently am partnered with African American Breastfeeding Network. I do facilitate their Healing Waters program in partnership, and so we were able to allow that programming to be offered here at the Redefining Life Center for Grief and Healing. And we have been blessed with a pilot location at the Table, which is on 53rd and Capitol, because one of the things that we wanted to do is make sure that our services were actually offered within the community that we serve and that was impacted by it. So here we are, and grateful for the opportunity, and grateful for anyone who has actually supported us in order for us to be able to start the building of this center. So this gives you a peek into what I am, as far as how the relationship between the work that I do and why I am passionate about the work that I do. So hence there's the Monday Mortality Minute, because it's just a little bit of a digestion that's a little easier if we take it in smaller little pieces. But also working on being able to bring a podcast to the space, which is Moments in Mortality. So just a bit of expansion. So instead of taking a minute to talk about things, we'll talk about them a little bit longer, and being able to build the space out to be able to have those conversations about death, dying, grief, and life. So stay tuned. If you found me here in the Facebook space, you can follow our Facebook page, which is Dignity with Departure, which is where I offer those lovely end-of-life services. And we're on Instagram with Dignity with Departure. And you can also find us on YouTube with Moments in Mortality, which find us in any of those spaces to be able to connect with me, other people like us who want to talk about something that is going to impact all of us, which is death. So in the meantime, be mortal.